Okay, I was muted. I'm sorry. So we can begin.
Yes, please.
Madhukar. So can we make a request to Dr. Mario Aguza to formally begin?
For a while, sir, we are turning in
Right.
our FB Live for our participants to be able to check in. We should be going full live in 5 minutes.
Okay.
So if you could just mute
Okay.
for now. We are going live.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, in few minutes, we will be starting our webinar. Thank you. Good morning, India. Good afternoon, Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our webinar today. I am Mario Aguja, the President of the Philippine Sociological Society of the Philippines, and I will be your moderator for this webinar. I am joining you from the Museum of Cultural History and Arts of the Mindanao State University in General Santos City, Southern Philippines. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar on our topic, examining the COVID-19 response of India and the Philippines. While you must have heard the different narratives about COVID in your respective countries, this is the first time we're bringing together two countries for a very, very important discussions. Today as well, we are formally launching the significant partnership between the Philippine Social Science Council, or PSSC, and the Indian Council of Social Science Research, or ICSSR, to officially welcome us and introduce to us this partnership forged during the height of the COVID pandemic. Let us hear from the Executive Director of the Philippine Social Science Council. She was a professor of communication at the University of the Philippines, Diliman College of Mass Communication, and was former chair of the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Social Science Council. She also served as college secretary of the UP College of Mass Communication and chair of its Communication Research Department, and served as a special assistant to the president of the University of the Philippines System. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Dr. Lourdes Portus.
Can you hear me now? Am I?
Yes, please. Go
All
ahead,
right.
Dr. Portus.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, Dr. Aguja. So I'd like to greet Dr. VK Malhotra, our dynamic partner from ICSSR, our most distinguished speakers and reactors, Dr. Michael Tan and Dr. Greg Del Pilar from the Philippines, and Dr. Prof. Sachin Chaturvedi and Dr. Pustan Patwardhan from India. officials and members and beloved staff of the Philippine Social Science Council and the Indian Council of Social Science Research, our more than 500 viewers and participants, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant afternoon for all Filipinos and good morning to all our friends from India. Welcome to the first of a series of webinars being mounted by PSSC and ICSSR. You know, in late August this year, just this year, a memorandum of understanding was signed between PSSC and ICSSR to develop a better understanding of social sciences and humanities in the Philippines and in India. We will do this through collaborative research, networks of social scientists, and free and open exchange of relevant information. The collaboration also aims to sustain and continue the partnership by initiating cross-country learning exchanges, linking the social science knowledge products to context-specific public policies, and more trading of researchers, methodologies, training programs, publications, and promoting high standards of research and excellence in the social sciences. Upon agreeing to this collaboration, we lost no time and immediately planned for this series of webinars. Among the priorities under this collaboration are addressing current problems in society. Apropos of both countries' condition today, the COVID pandemic has been a major concern. Thus, this seminar, being our first salvo in launching the collaboration, will deepen the discourse and provide a different perspective on the role of social scientists, especially during the COVID pandemic, and focusing on their work, stories, and experiences. I will also plug the two other webinars that you should watch out for. The second webinar will be about understanding social protection among COVID-19 victims, especially dealing with experiences of the vulnerable populations from the two countries. It would be good to know more areas of social protection that our policymakers will be looking at. Meanwhile, the third webinar will revolve around understanding economic stimulus packages during COVID-19. So we hope to see you again virtually in these forthcoming webinars. In the meantime, today we are lucky to put together luminaries from Philippines and India. Because of them, a friend asked me, "My golly, how are you able to assemble such powerhouse cast?" So you see, this early, I am being congratulated for being able to gather this much sought-after speakers. And you will understand why when we listen to them. So I think I must end now so we can hear them shortly. Welcome to the launch of this two-country collaboration. Thank you so much for attending. Good day and mabuhay. Dr. Aguha, are you lost? Hello? Dr. Mayong, I think we lost him.
Dr. Porchus, I think we can begin.
Yeah, so
Right.
are you there, Dr. Aguha?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Porchus, the Executive Director, Philippine Social Science Council, Dr. Aguha, the President, Philippine Sociological Society, Dr. Michael L. Tan, Professor Emeritus and former Chancellor, University of the Philippines, Diliman, Dr. Gregorio Del Pilar, President, National Research Council of the Philippines, and from India, Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, Chairperson right now, Indian Council of Social Science Research, and Vice Chairperson, University Grants Commission. Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, New Delhi. Uh, the entire academic fraternity from Philippines, from India, my learned colleagues at Indian Council of Social Science Research, and there at Philippine Social Science Council also. So good afternoon and namaskar from India. It's really a great start. As Dr. Porteous very rightly put, that we had decided the terms of our MOU towards the end of May 2020 during this COVID-19 period itself. We all understand that this COVID-19 period has given us an opportunity to go beyond borders through technology. So flights and air transportation also did not come our way in joining our friends in any parts of the world. So formally, this MOU was formalized sometimes in August 2020, as very rightly said by Dr. Porteous. And this MOU, as far as activities are concerned, envisages following activities to be undertaken, which includes exchange of scholars, joint seminars, training, workshops, conferences, collaborative research projects, creation of networks and networking, publications, website links, exchange of literature, documents, data, and other joint publications. I'm very, very happy on this occasion that as far as our dynamic collaboration with a number of countries, both bilateral and multilateral are concerned, we are making a very, very sound start with the Philippine Social Science Council today with this webinar. The other countries which are there as our collaborators and with which we have a very active engagement, they include National Research Council Thailand, Vietnam Academy of Social Science, National Science Foundation Sri Lanka, Economic and Social Research Council UK, the Netherlands Scientific Organization, the Netherlands, German Research Foundation, Germany, Zurich University of Applied Sciences, Switzerland, Japan Society for Promotion of Science, Japan, National Institute for the Humanities and Social Sciences, South Africa, Swedish Research Council for Health, Working Life and Welfare, Sweden, Ministry of Science and Technology, Taipei, Taiwan, and Korean Social Science Research Council, Republic of Korea, British Council. And as far as our multilateral collaborations are concerned, they include EU-India Platform for Social Sciences and Humanities, and we are soon going to enter into a collaboration with the European Commission also. And we are part of the international organization, which are United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, Association of Asian Social Science Research Councils, International Science Council, and Science Council of Asia. As Dr. Porteous very rightly said, that it is first of the three webinars that we have planned to take place in the month of October, November, and finally in December, with which we are launching our collaboration. And the topic that we have chosen is very much related to the problem that the entire world has been facing since November, December 2019. So we are beginning with stories from social science communities in India and the Philippines and the COVID-19. The next conference, the next webinar will be taking place on social protection. And I'm very, very happy to share with you that in the month of April, May, ICSSR gave a call on COVID-19 itself. We received almost 1,200 proposals against the calls. And taking cognizance of that, United Nations also included us and made ICSSR to co-chair a social protection steering group created to advise on the development of a United Nations research roadmap for the COVID-19, which is to be commissioned by United Nations. and it was to be launched at the UN General Assembly. Talking about the major concerns, we know that there are more than 38.7 million cases in the world. Nearly 0.5% population of the entire world so far has got infected by the disease. If I talk in terms of the death, it includes almost more than 1 million deaths now, which is 2.8% of the total infected population, whereas 19 million population has nearly recovered from the disease. A number of countries have got their own stories in terms of the proportion of population getting infected by the disease, then the death rates itself, the recovery rate itself, and there have been important issues related to vaccine, development of vaccine or medicine for the disease, and number of social science issues pertaining to economy at national, subnational, and global level, supply chain, number of psychological health related issues, problems related to continuance of education, right? All those issues have been flagged. So I would not like to stay much between the audience and the very learned speakers that we have for today. Another prime concern that economies or the societies have talked about are related to the proportion of the population getting infected by this disease and the death rate of the population, the health infrastructures within societies and the nation, which have been cause of concern. As far as India is concerned, at this stage, 0.56% of the population, which is at 7.3 million people, have got infected, and our death rate thus far has been 1.52%, and 111,000 people have died because of the disease. I was looking at the statistics for Philippines also. Nearly 0.3% of the population has got infected, and as far as death rate is concerned, it is around 1.8%. And then there are a number of countries in Asia, Europe, and other parts of the world also. I was looking at the statistics for Mexico also, which is one among the worst sufferer in terms of the death rate, where death rate stands at 10.2% as on date. So with these words, I welcome all the contributors today and also the audience which has joined us. I'm told that number of collaborators of ICSSR from all over the world are also joining us. Number of research institutes of ICSSR and their faculty have also joined and got themselves registered. And I'm told that many academicians, researchers, and research administrators from Philippines are also joining us on this afternoon. So I leave it to Professor Aguha, in fact, to take the proceedings further and start with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Aguha.
I'm back.
You're back. Okay, all right. I'm
Thank
ready.
you very much. It
Over.
happens. If it does not happen to you, then you must probably not be living in the Philippines. Thank you very much, Dr. Portus and Dr. Malhotra, for this initiative of bringing together these two countries. Today's webinar will inquire into perspectives and COVID-19 responses of the governments and social scientists in India and the Philippines. As mentioned during the welcome, this is brought to you by the Philippine Social Science Council and the Indian Council for Social Science Research. The Indian Council for Social Science Research provides grants for projects, fellowship, international collaboration, capacity building, survey and publications, and others to promote research in the social sciences in India. It was established by the government of India to promote research in the social sciences. Meanwhile, the Philippine Social Science Council is a non-profit organization of professional social science associations in the country, doing social research, and also includes instructional institutions in the country. It has 14 regular member associations representing the varied social science disciplines and around 40 associate member institutions in the country. To start with our conversation today, may I present to you our first speaker, who is a popular person in the country, both in the public discourse and in the media. He is a medical anthropologist by profession. He is a professor emeritus at the University of the Philippines in Diliman, Quezon City. And in addition, he is a clinical professor with the College of Medicine at the University of the Philippines in Manila, where he directs a graduate degree program in medical anthropology and lectures with graduate program in genetic counseling and in bioethics. He's also an affiliate faculty of the College of Science and with the Tri-College Philippine Studies program, both in the UP Diliman. Our resource speaker has also served in local and international health committees in the Department of Health of the Philippines, the World Health Organization, and has been a consultant with the various organizations including the UNICEF, the NIDA, European Union, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. In 2012, our speaker was appointed as a national academician and a member of the National Academy of Science and Technology, which is the highest advisory body to the government on science and technology. His appointment as national academician includes a citation that summarizes his commitments. And quote, his scholarly work provides the foundation for his social development advocacy and policy development work, which he sustains by ensuring that scientific knowledge is effectively communicated to various stakeholders, including policymakers, community development workers, health professionals, and the general public. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Tan from the Philippines. Dr. Tan.
Thank you, Dr. Aguha. And just a minute, I'm trying to. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, sige. I'll go ahead. I'm not able to do a slideshow on this computer, but I think it should be readable. So it is readable, right, Dr. Portus?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah. So let me proceed. We're under a bit of time constraints, both Dr. Del Pilar and myself, unfortunately, but I promised him I'd get this done in 15 minutes. Okay. I chose to talk about governance, culture, and COVID-19 in the COVID-19 management in the Philippines. I thought this was the best way of dealing with one of the more important issues, but not often recognized. The
Is Dr. Tan there?
Dr. Tan, you're not, I think we lost you.
I'm sure it will not take very long time for Dr. Tan to join us again. Dr. Portus?
Yeah. Let me see. Is Dr. Greg around also? Is he also having a problem? You know, is it about?
I'm not having a problem yet.
Okay, all right. That's good.
Let's take Dr. Tan. I'm sure he's lagging in now. This is the kind of internet connections we have here in the Philippines. I'm not sure whether the same thing is happening in India also.
So,
We always have a joke in the Philippines. If you are not cut off on the air, or if you don't hear sound of animals on the background, then you are not from the Philippines. Yes, Dr. Tan, I think, is back.
Okay, I'm back
Yes, thank you
on.
very much. Go ahead, Dr. Tan. Thank you.
Am I getting through?
Yes,
yes, yes.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So let me take.
Loud
I'm
and
sorry
clear.
about that. No. Yeah. I don't think I should repeat from the start. No, I just wanted to point out that one of the problems we have, oh no, there's a notice that's saying connections unstable, is that the management of COVID-19 in the Philippines has been controlled pretty much by the military. Most of the people in the interagency task force are men, and many of them are military men. No? And this can be problematic. Now, let me see. I'm sorry again. Okay. And we're talking about very punitive quarantine rules, no, that were enforced. No, for example, in some urban poor areas, residents were not allowed to even sit in front of their homes. That was said to be a violation of the rules. Children and the elderly were the most affected, but so too were migrants and temporarily stranded individuals, people who were not from Manila. What we're really talking about is governance without cultural competence. No? And this was shown, this is an example in May, when they actually sent armored personal carriers into one of the barangays in Tondo, a barangay sa village, as well as some 200 police on motorcycles. No? And this was to implement the quarantine rules and to do mass testing. I think this was a height of cultural incompetence, because after that, people were so fearful of quarantine and of mass testing. And then, of course, people were arrested for violating rules. They were kept in the gyms. At least there was some distancing that was enforced in here. I'm sorry here. Yeah. And the problem, of course, is combined with the punitive measures were, of course, impunity. There were double standards. There have been exposés in the mass media of officials being very, very strict, but from within their own ranks, breaking the rules. I don't need to elaborate too much on there. What was particularly disturbing was that if anything was being quarantined, it was civil liberties. On top of all those lockdown violations was a growing quarantine on civil liberties. A new law, an anti-terror bill, has been passed that allows warrantless arrests and detentions. The country's largest media network has been closed down, supposedly for breaking some laws around foreign equity. Journalists and others critical of the administration have been arrested, sued, or killed. And this just happened this week. A very tragic convergence. If you look at the COVID-19 discourse and what's happening elsewhere. An urban poor activist, Reina Nasino, was pregnant when arrested some months back. Her child, River, was born in July and separated from her after a month. Those are the rules in the Philippines. And the child died this month of pneumonia, separated from the mother. Reina was granted a 3-day furlough to be with the child at the wake and the funeral, but this was modified to 3 hours at the wake on Wednesday, yesterday, and 3 hours for the burial, which will be tomorrow. This picture I thought was atrocious. No? She was at her daughter's wake. They brought her in PPE, because they said that she might pick up the virus and bring it up to the detention centers. But look at her, she was in handcuffs. No? Is this the way you go about consoling someone who has lost a loved one? All of this, of course, has been in the name of COVID-19, the COVID-19 emergency. Yet, despite a relatively early response, we have Southeast and East Asia's highest number of infections, 344,000 reported infections and 6,000 deaths, with a continuing increase of between 1,500 to 4,000 cases each day. And then people's response. A recent nationwide public opinion survey from Pulse had a 91% trust rating for the president, up 4 points from the last survey, leading many social analysts, including the polling firm itself, to wonder what exactly was going on. It's interesting that halfway across the world, that's our president, his fellow populist Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, also known as the tropical Trump, whose COVID-19 policies have been as bad as the US president's, reached his highest approval ratings in August at 37%. Of course, trailing far behind Duterte, but still considered very high for Brazil. And analysts proposed that people were content because they had received financial assistance. So too in the Philippines, one of the explanations there about the high approval rates for the president was that one tranche that took 3 months to be distributed perhaps helped his ratings, even if this tranche was accompanied by allegations of corruption. So much so that the national government itself decided to remove the second tranche distribution from local government officials. My point here is that populism puts people in power, and it has actually been fairly easy for such leaders to keep a country hostage by fears and promises of redemption through authoritarian governance. And this is why I wanted to give this narrative to suggest that we really need to interrogate some of the measures that have been bandied around. There is a Global Health Security Index that was produced last year, trying to look at the preparedness of various countries. And if you look at their criteria, they're all biomedical. You talk about pathogens, about epidemics, about a robust health sector, commitment to improving national capacity and financing, and adherence to norms. And these are fine. And yet, if you look at this, at these 5 criteria, should it be surprising that at the top of the Global Health Security Index, meaning these were supposed to be the countries that would be the most prepared for health emergencies? United States, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Australia, and Canada. And we know, of course, the US is now has one of the biggest problems with COVID-19. The UK is not that much better off. I gave number 6 to 10 as well. Just something to think about. I think we social scientists have to look at the many factors that come in. And yes, they rank there quite high, and some of them are doing very well, but some are not doing well at all. The Lancet Medical Journal and the COVID-19 Commission issued a very interesting statement recently that gives 10 priority actions to deal with COVID-19. Again, heavily biomedical, but at least they refer now to the need to protect vulnerable groups, which I understand is going to be the second webinar that PSSC and the Indian Council will be holding. They refer to long-term financial reforms and justice in the access to tools to fight COVID-19. Missing in the Global Health Security Index and in the Lancet statement are references to culture and to governance, as well as the culture-governance interface, as we see in the interactions of populist leaders and citizens. So my point here is we need more qualitative research agendas that capture the full picture, that allow more voices to be heard, and that are analyzed with an understanding of the power relations that affect the research responses, meaning the survey responses. I suggest that it's time to bring back Raymond Williams' structures of feeling, way back in 1954, mainly used by arts and humanities. But I keep thinking that in relation to COVID-19, we might want to talk more about gathering narratives that capture those structures of feeling, which refers to the different ways of thinking vying to emerge at any one time in history. It appears in the gap between the official discourse of policy and regulations, the popular response to official discourse, and its appropriation in literary and other cultural texts. I've argued that we should be looking at all the different representations of COVID-19, including cartoons, including jokes, including songs, which might be better at this point to pick up the public opinion that people have. We need as well to document examples of COVID-19 management that are both compassionate and scientific. Reports have come out about women's leadership throughout the world. Countries that are headed by women seem to do much better. And I think also in the Philippines, despite our rather dismal situation, there have been local officials, mayors and governors that made the difference because they had the heart. You'll remember Pasig Mayor, when public transport was closed down, he suggested that he could bring out the tricycles. So he looked for ways to help the poor when they lost a loved one. He arranged things with funeral parlors for free cremation. Their narratives are really part of the structures of feeling that transform and that are transformative. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan, for the very interesting presentation, an up-to-date presentation, actually, what's going on in this divide of the Philippines. Importance of governance, cultural sensitivity, developing more discourses in other forms, and of course, the need for compassionate and scientific work that we have to do. Thank you very much for reminding us of the tradition of the social science. To Now let us hear an insight and reaction of Dr. Gregorio del Pilar. Dr. Del Pilar is the president of the National Research Council of the Philippines and the chair of the NRCP Division of Social Sciences. With roots from Bulacan in central Luzon, Dr. Del Pilar is popular among the scholarly circles as an advocate for the use of Filipino as a medium of instruction and in the daily professional communication. He has supported the use of Filipino as language in research and translated many of his research work in Filipino. His namesake, Dr. Del Pilar, is associated with the Philippine hero General Gregorio Hilario del Pilar y Sempio, his great-grand-uncle. Dr. Greg obtained his AD Psychology from the University of the Philippines cum laude and his doctorate in differential psychology mention tres honorable avec félicitation. Pardon me for my French. From the Université de Paris, Nanterre in 1998. He served in the executive board of the World Association of Personality Psychology and is a fellow of the Pambansang Samahan sa Psikolohiya and the Psychological Association of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Dr. Greg Del Pilar. Dr. Greg, please. Thank you.
Magandang hapon po sa lahat. As Dr. Aguha has said, I'm an advocate of the use of Filipino in academic discourse and as well as in everyday discourse in government and in education. And for this reason, well, that means that I've been delivering my dogs. You can hear my dogs.
That only tells that you are really from the Philippines broadcasting now. It's okay, Dr. Greg.
Oh, goodness. Well, we were having Dr. Tan and Dr. Aguha both fell off the air. And now my dogs are raising such a ruckus out in my carport.
Very nice background.
Yes. Well, hopefully they will quiet down in a little while. Anyway, so yes, this is, I welcome this opportunity to speak in English once again. I miss it sometimes, not too much, but here we are. Okay.
You're still audible, Dr. Greg. You're coming very good.
Okay, so you can hear me despite
Yes.
the background.
Yes,
All right.
yes, good. Thank you.
Okay, I am a personality psychologist, and so therefore, even if I am the chair of the Division of Social Sciences and the National Research Council of the Philippines, which encompasses the 13 different, very comprehensively, the different disciplines in the country, my comments will be naturally colored by my background as a psychologist. I would like to comment on the puzzling findings that Dr. Tan mentioned regarding our president, President Duterte, and Bolsonaro's and Brazil's Bolsonaro. But first, before I do that, I would like to, well, Dr. Tan's reference to Raymond Williams' work on structure of feelings is not something I'm very familiar with. But what it has recalled, what I recall on the basis of that, his brief discussion on it, is something from from Freud. I clear my throat there because I know that even among psychologists, today's psychologists, Sigmund Freud is not the most popular. However, despite what we might say about his theory, the fact of the matter is that there are aspects of Freudian theory that have been verified by very rigorous experimental methods. I am referring to his theory of the unconscious. It has been shown that a lot of psychological processing really takes place at the subconscious level. And we know from personal experience that we are able to verify, we can see intuitively this makes sense to us because we know, for example, that it is true that we can sleep on a problem. Usually, if we are preoccupied with a problem, or it happens quite often that when we are preoccupied with a problem, we sometimes are able to resolve it after sleeping on it. And this is the reason why we have that expression, sleeping on a problem. And we do know that some important scientific discoveries have come about as a result of dreams. In other words, our minds continue to function at a subconscious level, even as we are not aware of it, and even as we sleep. All right, that's number one. And then, other than that, we also are familiar with experiences of suddenly having a feeling that we can't explain. We're fine, and then all of a sudden we're blue or we're discouraged, and we don't know why. And the reason that psychologists give to explain this is that there is actually an accumulation of events that we perceive at the not fully. They don't fully enter our consciousness. It could be a remark that somebody made. It could be a sight that we saw, and it is registered at a low level of consciousness so that we're not aware of it. But because of an accumulation of these negative, of these perceptions that affect us negatively, then we get that feeling. We get that feeling of being discouraged or blue, a negative affect that suddenly, because of the buildup, now reaches our consciousness, but we don't know why. So these are findings from Freudian theory, which I think can give us some insight as to why we have these puzzling findings about the popularity of populist leaders, no, that we see that Dr. Tan cited in reference to the Philippines and Brazil. And I would like to bring in at this point a theory from social psychology this time, and I will share my screen. This is the theory by Carl Festinger. Cognitive dissonance theory is a classic, one of the classic social psychological theories. And well, I will give a little explanation of this. For those of you who are not familiar, I beg the indulgence of those who are very familiar with this theory. But I think there are some of us who might not be very clear on what this theory deals with. All right, the theory in brief says that opposing cognitions or behaviors produce tensions. For example, the cognitions that I smoke or the behavior that I smoke, when put together with the knowledge that smoking is bad for one's health, produces tension in us. So the individual is motivated to reduce the tension by changing one of the cognitions or behaviors. For instance, he can say, or he can change his behavior so that he now knows, I no longer smoke because smoking is bad for one's health. The two cognitions are now consonant with one another, and as a consequence, the tension, the psychological tension is reduced. Or I smoke because smoking is not really all that bad for one's health. Once again, here, the two cognitions are no longer opposed to one another. The larger the dissonance, the larger the change in cognition or behavior. Now, the classic laboratory setup to test cognitive dissonance theory, the predictions of cognitive dissonance theory, is you have two groups. Both groups are given a boring task. For example, they're asked to fill out random numbers in sheets of graphing paper, no? With their multitude of little squares. You fill that out with random numbers. That's the task given you. Or they're asked to stack cubes one on top of the other, so that to find out just how high the cubes can go before they fall. So this is unquestionably a boring task for most people, correct? Now, the two groups are then treated in a different way. That is to say, one group are told that they are given $20 as a reward, and another group is given a reward of $1 for reward. Excuse me, these are American examples because the original experiments were carried out in the US. Okay. Afterwards, the groups are asked to rate the pleasantness of the task. Now, which group do you think would rate this boring task higher on a pleasantness scale? Most people would say it is the $20 group. But the fact of the matter is, it is the $1 group that gives it a higher rating. The $20 group would give it a lower rating. And the explanation is that there is a higher dissonance produced in the $1 group. Why is that? Because they know I'm doing this boring task, even as I'm being given only a $1 reward. All right. So they give it an honest rating, a low rating. On the other hand, I'm sorry, they give it a high rating because they have to resolve the dissonance. No, I'm doing a boring task, but I'm given such a lousy reward. This is because it is a pleasant task. That's what they tell themselves. On the other hand, the $20 group know that this is a boring task, but since I'm being given $20, I'm doing it anyway, but it's still a boring task. So the greater dissonance is produced in the $1 group, and as a consequence, they fool themselves more. They change their cognition about the pleasantness of the task. So how does this relate to the situation I want to explain? That is to say, why are populist leaders rated very highly? Dr. Tan gives an explanation. It has to do with the dynamics of authoritarian leadership. They're able to assure the populace and so forth. I'd like to go a little deeper and say, to propose a mechanism as to why that works. We have to recognize that even if we might think that we are not under high tension in this situation of the pandemic, there are many people who are under high tension, right? But I think there also are a lot of people, and there might be some of us who would be in this category, who think, well, the pandemic is there, but it's really not affecting me too much. What we must recognize is that a lot of the tension is at the subconscious level. I propose that a lot of the tension is at the subconscious level. We get to find out that a lot of our friends have lost their jobs, have lost their businesses. There is the uncertainty about health, about the health of our friends, our own, which cannot be treated because of the hospitals are full to the rafters of cases dealing with COVID. So all of these tensions, we don't know how things will develop in the next few months, in the next few years. All of these, even as they are not recognized at the conscious level, in my view, they build up. So people are under high tension, whether they're aware of it or not. And therefore, when they are faced with the question of whether they are satisfied with the performance of their leaders, what are your cognitions? At the subconscious level, you're under high tension, okay? And then if you are told you have a weak leader, you have a leader who does not know how to lead, this is a situation of dissonance. And your tendency is to say, no, my leader is fine. He can deal with it. He can deal with it. So that is how the cognitive dissonance is resolved. This is why we find, puzzlingly, leaders like Duterte and Bolsonaro have high ratings, despite the fact that they have not really performed very commendably. So I would like to end my reaction by joining Dr. Tan in suggesting that we need to come up with stories, more positive stories. But I would like to frame this in more general way. I think the what social scientists can do, one thing that social scientists can do is to put our efforts into communication with the public. Because the more the public is informed of of objective facts, the more we tell them why they ought to wear masks. Not just, we don't stop at just saying you cannot go out without masks, but if we explain why, if we explain social distancing sufficiently, I think this will go a long way in dispelling fears, and that this will produce greater confidence in the population, so that they can have less dissonances. Dissonances at the subconscious level are perhaps the most dangerous ones. If we are able to bring dissonant cognitions to consciousness, and then examine whether these dissonant cognitions are valid or not, I think we would be able to find our way to more valid conclusions. This would increase the confidence of people to confront the situation more realistically, and as a consequence, would be able to better decide, would be able to better input into policy making, speaking their minds, bringing their complaints to the authorities, and being able to reason as to why these should be attended and how they can cooperate in advancing correct solutions, better solutions to the pandemic. I apologize that I'm rushing like this. I have a meeting at 3 o'clock. I will definitely watch this on Facebook later on, because I'm very interested in what our Indian colleagues have to say. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greg, for the interesting presentation. I think our two speakers from the Philippines have captured the important discourses we have in this country related to COVID, from anthropological perspective to that of issue of governance, to that of the politics of it, to the psychology of it. These are in the awareness of many of our social scientists in the Philippines. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Now we go to the other side of the world, of Asia. We go to South Asia to listen to our colleagues. How do they see all these things as well from their own perspective? But before we proceed with that, we invite our viewers to join the discussion by sending their questions through the comment section on the Facebook live stream. We will take them up with our panelists later during the open forum as the time will permit. So at now, let me introduce our second resource person, and the first one coming from the Indian side. A person who is very accomplished. He is a Director General, at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, a New Delhi Policy Research Institute supported by the government of India. He was Global Justice Fellow at the Macmillan Center for International Affairs at the Yale University. He has done his PhD in economics. He works on issues related to development economics involving development finance. He is also on the board of the Reserve Bank of India. He has authored or edited 10 books, apart from contributing chapters in edited volumes and publishing several research articles in several prestigious research articles in various prestigious journals. He has served as a visiting professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he had been a developing country fellow at the University of Amsterdam and visiting fellow at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Shimla, and visiting scholar at the German Development Institute. He is also on the editorial advisory board of the IDS Bulletin. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming our colleague from India, no other than Dr. Chaturvedi. Dr. Chaturvedi, Sachin. Dr. Sachin, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Professor Agua. It's such a pleasure and honor to join you here. I must at the outset congratulate Professor V.K. Malhotra, the Member Secretary of the Indian Council for Social Science Research, and Dr. Portis from the Philippine Social Science Council for arriving at this partnership and embarking on this magnificent journey immediately after closing the bilateral agreement. And as Dr. Portis very rightly described, the dynamic leadership with ICSSR has enabled ICSSR to become more active. And as Professor Malhotra listed, there are several bilateral engagements they have come in, which are all going to supplement the wider global understanding on social science research and its great possibility of influencing the policy making. So without further ado, I must also congratulate and thank Dr. Michael Tan for very, very impressive presentation today, highlighting the policy challenges that are there and also suggesting a way forward. And I'm grateful to Dr. Del Pillar for suggesting as to what social science research can actually do. And this is what I feel, and my presentation actually starts with this very idea of what exactly we can contribute with and how social sciences can actually supplement the wider efforts. So what I'm trying to say is what Dr. Del Pillar stopped with. And my first point is very much his concern about communication. And in last 6 months or so, India has seen a very effective communication by the government on what exactly is the nature of the crisis. Led by the Prime Minister himself, the story of COVID handling in India is a very impressive account of very effective communication, emphasizing on the usage of the mask, suggesting quarantine, suggesting isolation, keeping physical distance, leveraging the strength of India's film industry, leveraging the Bollywood stars, leveraging social leaders, leveraging industrial houses, etc., to communicate. So physical distancing, etc., were not exactly forced. Wherever required, police had to act. But effective communication has been one very important dimension. The second point that I want to bring in is the effective communication between the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank of India. So the fiscal and monetary policy convergence is a reality and has happened very well. Both the Ministry of Finance and the Reserve Bank of India have worked together to tackle the crisis. And this is not the end of the story, Professor Agua. If you see, there were also very impressive convergences that have happened. So we have n number of science technology institutions, leading of them are 11. So a seamless convergence between science technology institutions led by the principal scientific advisor was the single most important achievement for us, where all the scientific institutions could come under one leadership and could go forward. The second important convergence that we saw, as you can imagine, with the more than 30 entities in India, with states, etc., it was very important that the central government, the state government, and the local governments, they all converged their action at one point. So seamless flow of information across these administrative entities for so many people is something that has happened in a great seamless convergence. Third important convergence that I want to talk to you today is about the idea of leveraging the strength of the traditional medicine with modern medicine, how you converge them, and it was emphasized that the The indigenous communities have been using these medicinal and aromatic plants, and I'm very glad that Dr. Bhushan Patwardhan is also in the panel, and I'm sure he would love to bring out this dimension of this great convergence that is happening. And this brings us to the cultural connect. Being a British colony at some point, we picked up several practices which were not part of our culture, and so handshake, etc., and the traditional style of wishing people, bringing in the cultural dimensions of keeping the shoes out of your home, the hygienic concepts that traditional Indian societies always appreciated, they all had got blurred in last 70 years or so. And this crisis has given a new cultural connect in terms of how we go forward. So these are the broad points that I would be talking in next 10 minutes to you, apart from emphasizing on evidence-based policy making. So round the clock leadership by Indian Council of Medical Research, collating evidences together, and cooperative federalism, bringing in the role of the civil society organizations, bringing in the role of the community and community participation in we going forward, apart from the government-led processes. So Prime Minister from day one has been saying that communities are important. People are important. So people-centric COVID strategy was the crux of this whole story that is there. And Dr. Agua, the results are here on my screen right now. If you look at per million deaths that are happening, our tally is not very different. You would realize that with such a huge population in India, the deaths that have happened, the losses that have happened are minuscule in terms of the huge strata of Indian society from whom development parameters in the last 70 years have remained completely out of it. And the development and industrial model emerged in such a fashion that migrations had happened over last several decades. And when this crisis hit us, reverse migration started towards the rural areas. And that quantum was huge. We were afraid if these people would be affected. But village communities have emerged as the most brilliant communities in India, and the crisis was averted. The villagers exercised restraint, and we could go forward. And as a result, now you find the addition to the new cases is continuously declining, and the story is emerging very well. The peculiarities, distinctiveness, and strengths are now being leveraged as a positive feature. If you look at the size and the area and the population, the diversity of cultures, the democratic society that we have, the new faith that people have acquired in the governance model, and the science technology innovation connect that have come up, be that with information technology, pharmaceuticals, or biomedical technologies that have come up. And if you see India and Philippines, a lot of similarities are there, Dr. Agua, which are largely in terms of both of us being democratic societies, both of us using technological labs, the COVID Kaya in Philippines and Arogya Setu in India are the web-based portal connected sort of apps that have come up to guide individuals about the infection in their surroundings, and keeping them also alert and aware of how dimensions are there. GDP growth has largely been affected in our respective countries and economies. But if you see the awareness that came in was largely from the beginning, and India could ban all travels from China right on 2nd of February itself. So Indian government acted very fast. Right in January, we started unbundling the sequence of events in China and the failure of Chinese quarantine agencies. So we started mapping all that out very early, and this has helped us in a major way in terms of coping up with the crisis and ensuring medical supplies, etc. They came up in a major way, and led by the Prime Minister's office, the state governments and the Ministry of Health in particular could bring in civil society, health workers, citizens, the STI centers, the Science Technology Innovation Centers, the media, and even connecting the village heads with the process. And Prime Minister addressed 2 meetings with the village heads, panchayats as we call them. And you find that this effective communication emerged as a major sort of connector. So e-Gram Swaraj portal that has happened, and that's what PM addressed right in April itself. And you find that a very timely and detailed information was settled. In fact, when Parliament is not in session, India has this system of passing ordinances. So right in April itself, with the help of our planning commission, we call that NITI, the National Institute for Transforming India, that passed inputs for getting ordinances cleared. And Dr. Ramesh Chand, who is our member agriculture in the Niti Aayog, made an effort to ensure that agriculture produce from farmers is free from all the lockdown processes. So even within the lockdown, the farmers have emerged as winners. And as I told you earlier, they have emerged as contributors to India's GDP growth. They were allowed to freely transact, and subsequently much more legislations have come in to enable farmers and the village societies' participation in the process. Impact of education and initiatives by government is another important dimension that has come in, and more sort of battle they were taken up by the school teachers, because all the schools were closed down, colleges were closed down. So how education system works in, none other than Professor Malhotra knows it best here in this panel, because they have been involved. Professor Bhushan Patwardhan knows it best. Universities, schools, they all could cope up with e-learning, and that has emerged as a success story for us. Easing market anxieties was equally important, and the Reserve Bank of India, and as I said, they constituted teams, and you would not believe, but more than 200 people were locked in a hotel to run a 24/7 all the e-transactions that were happening. So without any disruption, fintech and digital technologies could work. And sometimes we don't realize, but billions of transactions happened in these months, and these 200 people were locked inside a hotel in Mumbai, which is our financial hub for enforcing these transactions. So a lot of IT support, a lot of commitment and dedicated workers have gone in, and government also announced tax concessions, the interest rate deferments, and several of the concessions, including the delayed filing of penalties, etc., that have come up. Some of them have been waived off after Supreme Court has intervened. So quite a few new initiatives have come up. In fact, the Reserve Bank of India also allowed the long-term repo operations, targeted long-term repo operations that came in, the support for mutual fund, and several other schemes for small and medium enterprises. Their new classification was announced, specific measures were announced for MSMEs, and that could bring in, if you see the stimulus, it could address the requirements of the daily wages. It could address requirements of microfinance, MSMEs. India has a huge informal sector. The issues related to banks and farmers, and much more important to that was the food supply. How do you ensure food supply in a lockdown situation? So a lot of civil society organizations came up, and India has a very vibrant civil society, Dr. Agua, and that could contribute to this whole process. And if I say a fiscal stimulus that were announced, 2 of them, 1.0 and 2.0, they could provide the wherewithals to industrial and economic community. And as the Reserve Bank of India's report suggests, next year we are going to bounce back, and economy is likely to get the necessary traction that is needed. Direct benefit transfer has been a singular success for government, and rupees 6,000 were given to all the farmers in the previous fiscal year. That remaining exercise could continue. Specific programs were initiated in village areas for construction so that jobs can be created. And as a result, you find that a lot of things could be achieved. And as I said in the beginning, it could not have been possible without leveraging the strength of science, technology, and innovation. And this is what I have been discussing with Professor Malhotra for long now, to connect social sciences with hardcore sciences, something that Dr. Portis also referred to. And I think she's absolutely right that we need to see how hard sciences and social sciences and humanities converge, and we understand each other and take policy analysis forward. So war on COVID-19 had a lot of issues related to innovation, startups, and a lot of startups came up. And as a result, India could contribute, India could reduce the whole cost of operations that were there. And science technology played an extremely important role. I talked about the Kaya that Philippines has, but Arogya Setu was India's contribution and success. We are also part of the global vaccine development initiatives. 21 of them are there. India is part of all of them. 3 of them are now very close to final induction, and India is part of that global effort. We are also part of the clinical trials that are on. Ayush-related initiatives have also been encouraged, and protocols have already been introduced there. The government is also trying to bring in administrative leeway at the district level. So localization of the strategy is another important dimension, Dr. Agua, that I want to identify as a key success story. Until and unless central government empowers the local governments, without that, nothing can be achieved. And fortunately, from day one, Prime Minister emphasized on bringing people at the center and local administration at the center, and that could happen very well. As I said, India also tried new leaves out of its past. Ayush and Ayush-related products were identified. There were several people who relied on our traditional medicines, and somehow under the influence of Western countries, we had completely forgotten the strength of our own medicinal and aromatic plants, and they were revived. Prime Minister publicly came out in favor of it, and as a result, you find a sequence of meetings and discussions and media sort of features on advantages of plants, which can be leveraged for giving immunity, for giving vitality, giving you protection. So you find that apart from yoga and yoga-related features, many more dimensions came in for re-energizing people. As I said, civil society organizations played important role. Grassroots organizations came up. They did extremely well. A sort of cooperative federalism with the states helped. Several new dimensions came up in terms of supporting it. But this could not have been achieved, Dr. Agua, without we having clarity on the development initiatives itself. And this government could get that success because in the last 5 years, they built a huge ecosystem for delivering what is called as a digital payment platform, BHIM, BHIM as it is called in India. The Clean India drive, keeping the hygiene and cleanliness up there, National Biopharma Mission, the biometric identified accounts and direct benefit transfer to them, neighborhood first policy of connecting with our neighbors, people-centric development, civil society, traditional knowledge, startup, etc. They have played. I know I'm running out of time. I would just quickly run through my slides. Then care beyond borders is something, another success that Prime Minister has added to our whole portfolio. He called up the SAARC leaders. We have some of our best neighbors who are not always very cooperative, but in this hour of crisis, we extended and India announced a support of $10 million to our neighbors. and we also sent out several million doses of hydroxychloroquine. We also extended full support to our brothers and sisters in Africa, Mozambique, and many other places. There were several leaders who personally congratulated India and have identified. So the short point here is that the South-South cooperation, the partnership with the fellow developing countries, and it was unique crisis this time because the distinction between the North and the South blurred away. The vulnerabilities of the North were thoroughly exposed, and so were of the South. So how interdependence and global partnerships are of great significance is very important. And that's the reason why I, right at the outset, congratulated ICSSR and the Philippine Social Science Council for this partnership. The pandemics are not going to stop. They are going to be there. And unfortunately, with irresponsibility and technology infusion, the vulnerability of other countries are extremely high. So how a pandemic network can come up among countries, how social scientists can bring in more clarity and more understanding on issues, I think is important. So as public health crisis unfolds, we need to see how social scientists can cope up, because the impending part of it is the economic crisis, the public health crisis, the ideas that are there, as you very rightly mentioned, Dr. Agua, in terms of social distancing and communication. So how we encourage governments and other agencies to communicate, etc. So with this, I would stop, and I would thank both ICSSR and Professor Agua, you and your team, for giving me this opportunity and for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanchin. That's an excellent presentation. I'm sure our colleagues from this side of the world is thinking the difference of how you are doing things in your country and in our country, and probably the nuances of similarities. But I think this is what we would like to accomplish actually in our conversation today. Thank you very much. We'll get back to you. I think people are starting to pour in their questions to all our speakers and of course to our executive directors joining us here. Next, our next presenter will be coming from the Indian side as well. He's an accomplished scholar, and I should say accomplished orator as well. No, he is a biomedical scientist who is a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences of India and the National Academy of Medical Sciences in India. He was director of the Interdisciplinary School of Health Sciences at Savitribai Phulipun University. My apologies for the pronunciation there. He has been member of important national committees of the University Grants Commission, of the All India Council for Technical Education, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, Science and Engineering Research Board, on the Department of Science and Technology, the Department of Biotechnology, and Indian Council of Medical Research. He has worked, I think he worked a lot. He worked on several policy-making bodies, including task forces of National Knowledge Commission, the Planning Commission, and he serves also as consultant of the World Health Organization in Geneva. Our next speaker is editor-in-chief of Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine, published by Elsevier, and is on its editorial boards. And he is on the editorial boards of many reputable journals. He is recipient of many awards on oration, and he distinguished themselves on that particular field by winning numerous awards, both in the country and abroad. And he is also judged. He's not just a scientist, he's not just a researcher, he's also judged as a best teacher. I think many of us can relate to that easily. And he authored a lot of scholarly books, Integrated Approaches for Health and Innovative Approaches to Drug Discovery as among the publications he made, and have received excellent reviews. He has received several research grants and has guided 19 PhD students, 8 Indian patents. He's a holder of 2 US patents and over 120 research publications and 7,200 citations. I do not know if our knows the word rest with all the things he is doing in here. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's our honor to bring to you and join us in the conversation Dr. Busyan Patrawardan. Dr. Busyan.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mario Aguja.
Thank you very much for joining us. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're coming loud and clear.
And Humusta Magadang Hapon. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Magandang hapon po. Mabuti naman.
Good afternoon. Namaste.
Namaste.
Esteemed academicians from Philippines. Dr. Gregorio del Pilar, President NRCP, Dr. Portus, Executive Director, PSSC, Dr. Michael Tan, former Chancellor, University of Philippines, Diliman, and of course, Dr. Mario, who has been very, very actively comparing this webinar. Also my colleagues from India, Dr. V.K. Malhotra, Member Secretary, ICSSR, and Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi of RIS, who just gave a wonderful presentation. I was very happy to listen to both the presentations from Philippines side. They are very thought-provoking, and I must compliment both the speakers. I'm happy to witness a very active bilateral collaboration between ICSSR India and the Philippines Social Science Council, PSSC. The purpose of MOU between ICSSR and PSSC is to develop a better understanding of social sciences and humanities in India and in the Philippines through collaborative research networks of social scientists, free and open exchange of relevant information, and several activities are being planned as a part of this MOU, and this webinar is one of them. I hope that the webinar series, very, very appropriately named as Stories from Social Science Communities in India and the Philippines and the COVID-19. This will strengthen the collaboration between the two countries. India and Philippines friends have so much common in our civilization, in our culture, in our customs, in our businesses, foods, traditions, medicines, health practices, spiritual practices, so much commonalities. We can learn so much from each other, and we can work together to find solutions to our common problems as well as for the rest of the world. I truly enjoyed the scholarly thought-provoking presentations by Dr. Tan, and continuing with that, I just wanted to share some of the thoughts. In India, we have successfully used traditional medicine, as mentioned by Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi, that includes Ayurveda and yoga, and also simple home remedies with simple spices, herbs, medicated hot water, nasal applications of different kinds of oils, especially sesame oil, the steam inhalation, gargles with simple things like turmeric, they are being extensively used in India. And such simple and safe interventions have been found to be very important in improving immunity and to facilitate shedding or reduction of viral load in controlling further progress of the disease and also prevent further complications of COVID-19. Yoga has been found to be useful to improve respiratory efficiency and mental health. Recently, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, has added a section on Ayurveda and yoga protocols for prevention and management of mild cases of COVID-19. This is, of course, in addition to the non-pharmacological measures which all of us practice, such as physical distancing, wearing masks, washing hands, and sanitization, etc. As well as the modern medicine protocol for moderate to severe cases of COVID-19 also exist, So we are coming out with some kind of an integrative approach wherein best from traditional medicine and best from modern medicine are brought together in the best interest of people. And this has provided very practical, affordable, and safer solutions for people. At present, I am happy to tell you over 60 clinical trials on traditional medicine, which we call it as Ayush systems of medicine. And its acronym, Ayush meaning Ayurveda, Yoga, Unani, Siddha, Soarikpa, homeopathy, all put together. There is a ministry, independent ministry of traditional medicine, which is called as Ministry of Ayush of the Government of India. They have come out with this protocol, and it's a very unique integrative protocol wherein you find one protocol about modern aspects and one protocol about traditional aspects, and both are endorsed by the Government of India. We'll be very happy to share our knowledge, experiences, and explore this kind of a bilateral collaborations, to further these causes. As mentioned by Professor Malhotra, the ICSSR was co-chair for a social protection steering group created to advise on the development of United Nations research roadmap for COVID-19 recovery. This report will be very relevant for the second webinar, which both of you are planning. I wish to congratulate PSSC and ICSSR for organizing very successful webinar that has attracted large number of participants. As a biomedical scientist, I must tell you that modern medicine or only medical care is not sufficient, because health in many aspects, primarily, I believe that has also very intensive social relevance. So social sciences play equally important role along with medical sciences if you want to really manage health effectively. Medicine is different, but health, social aspects become extremely important. And I hope this webinar will attract many other collaborative partners to join this series and further expand our academic collaboration. Again, I will try to end by giving you best wishes in your language as well, Matubeting Suarati. And with this, I wish the webinar and both the organizers all the very best. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you very much. What's a very, very interesting discussion. I'm sure our colleagues in the Philippines are shaking their head on your discourse about traditional medicine, yoga. It seemed to be a taboo in this country in the height of the COVID pandemic. Thank you very much, sir, for very enlightening made. I think this is the importance actually of a cross-border discourse, because contexts are different, way are doing things are done differently, but nevertheless, I think the focus of all our resource persons, this is about people.
Yes.
And it means also on how do we care with people despite the differences in culture, traditions, and distances. I think there are a lot of things coming up to many of our friends joining us in this webinar. Our questions are coming in here. Probably we can have a little time to join each other for conversations and to share our views. Of course, I also encourage Dr. Portus, Dr. Malhotra to join us in this conversation this afternoon. Let me just start. I think we have a question in here for Dr. Sachin. Let's start. Our team is picking up the questions now from our Facebook Live. Very active conversation in there. this is not a question for Dr. Sachin, but rather a comment on how basically a traditional medicine has been integrated in your healthcare system. And I think it has been mentioned also by Dr. Patwardan that, you know, the traditional medicine had been part of your approach. And I think from this part of the globe, we were so surprised of that. Because the less than our president was saying, there's nothing much we can do except for the development of the vaccine. You know, and the medical field were saying, no, you cannot just go on, you know, herbal medicines and other things. And that had been a big debate. Could you just enlighten and add us on that and how the government is basically responding to it? Because listening to you,
Professor Agua,
yes.
This is an excellent question, and I must congratulate whoever has posed this question, because if in India anyone can answer this question best, is none other than Professor Bhushan Patwardhan.
Yeah, I
Bhushan Patwardhan is heading a committee of scientists constituted by the government of India to spearhead integration of not only these two streams, but also to address how the learning and teaching of the medical sciences can absorb the nuances of the two of these streams. As you might have observed his comment in the chat box, he has just commented that the two streams are to be leveraged in a way that we get best of both. So somehow the colonial past has been so strong in so many countries that we see only the West discovered ideas and progress as a panacea for our troubles and problems. The idea of applying modern science and technology for our traditional knowledge is something that Professor Bhushan Patwardhan is practicing for more than 20 years now. And I had met him almost 10 or 15 years ago to discuss this very issue when he was neck deep into this. And in fact, later he was in Mauritius when the president of Mauritius consulted him on what kind of approach we can really have. So I would very much request him to take the floor and explain.
Yes, please.
Professor
Yes, please.
Patwardhan.
Dr. Bhushan, enlighten us on this because it's really a big debate in this country. But we have a strong tradition as well of traditional medicines, different parts of the country. How come that, it's not filtering it to the centers of power, but in your case, it seems to be there's a seamless endorsement of putting together these things. Dr. Bhushan, would you like to enlighten us on this? And we have a lot of scholars in the country that's following us on this.
Thank you, Dr. Sachin, for that introduction, and thank you, Dr. For this kind opportunity, Dr. Mario. Let me tell you that COVID has brought both modern and traditional on the same level playing field, because COVID is as new to modern medicine as it is new to traditional medicine. So there is nobody's having upper hand. For example, if we talk about cardiovascular diseases, obviously modern medicine will have upper hand. They have advanced surgeries, they have advanced medicine, but for COVID, nobody has anything. So everybody is at the level playing field. So that's the first point. Second point, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Sachin, we cannot continue to go under the influence of monocultural dominance. That whatever is coming only from one particular thought process is only true. When we have our own knowledge system, when we have our own culture, when we have our own history, when we have our own practices, how can all of a sudden we forget everything and start thinking that what is coming from the West is only good? From West, whatever good is coming, we will take it. But we also have something good that we can give it not only to West, but also for our own people. So this is what is the basic idea. And it was not easy, even in our country, to push this idea. Let me tell you, bringing this protocol as a national protocol, a separate chapter on traditional medicine, was not easy task. We have to work very hard for it. We have to do several scientific studies. We have to bring a lot of empirical evidences put together to convince scientists what we are talking about is not only about traditional knowledge, but we are talking about based on empirical evidence which are testable. And we have done that. At present, there are 60 clinical trials happening in India, which are controlled clinical trials, and at top medical centers in India, wherein we have shown the early trends are showing that early interventions with simple remedies help people to prevent disease and also help progression of the disease to more severe cases. And this means that we are reducing the load in the hospital because people will be able to recover faster. And that's what we want, economies like ours, your country also, we want easy and affordable interventions. We can't afford to get our people every time in expensive hospitals and give them expensive and that also question mark safe medications, question mark safe medication. Why I'm putting question mark? If you look at all the medications, including hydroxychloroquine, where is the evidence? I'm asking, where is the evidence? Because even remdesivir, if you look at the recent clinical trial published in JAMA, they are saying there may be statistically significant evidence, but there is no clinically significant evidence. What does it mean, and why we should buy this expensive question mark safe medicines when we have simple home remedies, simple steam, simple gargle with simple spices, and you may choose your own tradition. You need not choose what India is using because every country they have, and especially Philippines, you have such a rich tradition. You have such a rich knowledge. You have such a rich repository of biodiversity and herbal medicine. You can choose your own materials. But the point is, if we are able to use that at the early stage, you can prevent. Unfortunately, if you get disease, still with simple remedies, you can help virus to shed early. You can help virus clearance from throat. It's traveling to lung. That process can be controlled, and so that the load on your hospitals can be reduced. Even if we are able to do this, I think we are doing a great service to our country and to our people. And this is the attempt which we are doing in India. And if now we are getting little bit of success, I will say only little bit of success, because in India, there is still a very huge dominance of Western medicine. And I belong to Western medicine. I am a biochemist. So I'm not saying that from that perspective. I don't differentiate medicine from Western or Eastern perspective. I look at medicine, which is something which is beneficial for people, which is affordable by the people, and which is safe for people, So from wherever it comes, it is fine for me. Evidence-based medicine, but evidence also, we should ask this question, who will decide what is the evidence? That also is question. And my last point in this is, absence of evidence should not be interpreted as evidence of absence. And so for many things in traditional medicine, you may not have so-called evidence, which today's modern science may call it as evidence, but you have experiential evidence, So evidence-based medicine, that E, need not be only of experimental evidence, but it also should be experiential evidence. So that's what we try, and you will find that many reflections of what I'm talking about are in the current editorial which I have written and which I have just posted in the chat box, which you are free to share even on the Facebook. And I know that this is not a simple subject, but we will have to work this together, Countries like Philippines and India, where you have strong traditions, we should feel proud of these traditions, But at the same time, we should not get into the mode of self-pride and past glory. We have to take science, modern science with us and travel on the scientific path for betterment of the humankind. That's what my short message will be. I'm sorry, I was a little longer, and this is not typically only social science perspective, but as I told you, health is something where science and social science must converge together. Nobody in isolation can address problems of health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that note, Dr. Bushan. No, you are just fueled again a big debate in this country because it was really at some certain point at the height of COVID-19, no? And one of the local government where the tradition of steam inhalation as a traditional medicine actually endorsed it to the public and, develop a package of it and send it to different communities. And that was highly criticized by the medical profession in this country. And I think Dr. Tan came as among the minority voices on this, how I wish we have medical practitioners like you in this country. But I think you are just encouraging a big debate in this country again, because this is something we truly miss. And people were saying, we have used it. We experienced relief from it for a long, long time. And it was handed to us through generations. Then suddenly we are told, oh, you cannot use it now. COVID is fatal. COVID is different. I love this debate and this discussion.
Dr. Mario, I want to tell you that we, all of us together, those who believe in science, those who believe in humanity, must come together and change this narrative. Today, we are being given this narrative that modern medicine is the only answer. Modern medicine is answer for emergencies, for acute care, but for prevention, for immunity. What modern medicine can give you to improve your immunity? So there are two ways to combat COVID. One way is to give antivirals, and other way is to empower your body to increase your immunity, to increase your mental capability to heal yourself. So both are important, and we should adopt both.
Why it sounds so logical and so easy for you, listening to you. But here seems to be very, very complicated thing. How I wish Dr. Tan is here to share. He has a problem connecting with us.
Even more complicated, and it is even more challenging in our country as well. So you should not feel that.
Yes, but that will be a very good discourse. Yes, Dr. Portus will be joining us in our conversation, please.
Right. I find Dr. Bushan as an epitome, an epitome of the fusion of the physical and the social sciences. Being a biomedical scientist, here you are promoting alternative medicines. The Philippines is not a stranger in terms of also promoting alternative medicines. We use herbal medicines, and there are a lot of stores also selling this. But our problem is that we are controlled by big pharmaceutical industries. So I think that's one of the reasons why we cannot fully utilize all of these things in nature. There is a big advertisement now, in Facebook that we can gargle with salt, we can use hot water, we can use lemon, but these are not really taken seriously, and I think because there are trolls in Facebook and there are trolls in the social media that will prevent us from believing this. So that's the situation here in the Philippines. There is a strong and well-funded pharmaceutical industry, that will not make us use all of this alternative to Western, Eastern medicines. So we're really in a bad situation, and hopefully we can, your stories about your exploration of all of these herbs is really very encouraging, and we hope we will learn from you and we will, try to do something about our condition.
I could imagine Dr. Tan would really love this discussion we have because Dr. Tan published the book on herbal medicines in the Philippines, actually. He's an authority for that. But again, it's you're right, Dr. Portus, that when the big pharma gets in and the medical field is also funded and supported by the big pharma, who really don't like to use these traditional medicines back home. Yeah. Thank you on that. Yes.
I want to make one point about big pharma. Let me tell you, because I also work closely as consultant to many pharmaceuticals, so I have seen pharma industry closely. I am basically a drug researcher. My main bread and butter comes from drug research. So, but I must tell you that at the highest level in pharmaceutical industry, the realization has come now in them that our business which is based on agonies of people, cannot be sustainable. So they are changing their models from curative to preventive. The new models which pharmaceutical industries are talking about, they are talking about more about immunology, they are talking more about inflammation, they are talking about prevention. So this realization has come to them, but obviously they have pressing needs to increase their profitability. And so for some time, at least, we will have to face this, and we will have to together try to change these narratives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't want to rub the salt so much on this traditional medicine discourse and the big pharma, but there is one big issue I think that both countries shared. India and the Philippines has a lot of overseas workers, working across borders in different parts of the region. How is government coping up with our foreign workers? Indians working different parts of the world got stuck in there because in the Philippines, as you all know, a big part of our national income is really coming from overseas Filipino workers who had been affected terribly by the pandemic, and yet the ability of the government to support them becomes a big question also nowadays. So may we know the initiatives undertaken by your government from that perspective? Dr. Sachin or Dr. Malhotra might like to share in the conversation on that.
Professor Malhotra.
Sachin, would you take this question?
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Or I could supplement that later.
Okay,
thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Professor Agua. I think before I respond to you, I just sent a message. There are some people waiting in your waiting room of the Zoom. So can you ask any of your IT manager, Dr. Agua, if they can clear? So,
yes,
Miguel can
couple of people are waiting there.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that is one. But second, I think on this whole issue of migration and the efforts that governments are making in terms of addressing the challenge, there are 2-3 different dimensions that in India we have seen. First and foremost is that with the lockdowns prevailing all across the world, several of the Indian citizens were stuck outside. And as I told you that right from January, we had started very closely monitoring China's response to several of the global, though the WHO delayed global alert, but we ourselves had started taking measures, and government introduced what now is a very popular phrase of Vande Bharat. So under Vande Bharat, India launched a major exercise with millions of Indians stuck outside were brought back home, and this was a huge number, by the way. And under this, hundreds of flights were operated not only for Indians but also for some of the neighboring countries. They were stuck in Latin America and in all parts of the world. So that was one major exercise that was done. The second was when people came back, as I was also telling you, that the migration was not only international to us, it was also domestic migration. So government started working on several issues vis-a-vis domestic migration. Professor Malhotra would tell you, he himself led a mega research program on COVID, within which they have encouraged social science research on the psychological framework, the mental agony, the job losses, the opportunity of connecting with technology, and n number of social dimensions. So that's the second layer. But within government initiatives, as I said, continuous communication with heads of villages could bring in the decentralized approach on managing the migration crisis and the people affected by it. The third level, which was equally important, was to share the medications that were needed for isolation and quarantines that were needed. So under this, lot of tests were done, like for instance, not only for Indians stuck outside India, but also for some of the countries where the pandemic was huge. So several of the blood tests were done by India through our own diagnostic kits to strengthen the crisis management that was there. Professor Malhotra?
Thank you very much. Dr. Sachin. Yes, Dr. Malhotra.
Yes, to add few things to what Dr. Sachin has already talked about. One is that Vande Bharat, he very rightly said that the Indians who are settled or who were settled abroad, they were brought back to India through those kinds of measures. And it did help some of our neighboring countries also. That's one thing. On migration, two issues. One is international migration and the migration within the country. And when people went back from the metropolitan cities or major towns back to their villages, or let's say semi-urban areas, it was termed as reverse migration. Despite being a student of economics, I'm compelled to understand that the issue behind migration was not economic in totality. Right, there were other issues also. For example, anxiety, psychological reasons, feeling unsafe, and one important thing in the initial phases of the pandemic, perhaps people were not too sure that the facilities that exist, if we get deceased, we would be soon taken to a hospital. These kind of, psychological reasons led to reverse migration. And secondly, when in the middle of the pandemic, the Prime Minister of the country talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-reliant India, I think he was referring to the very model of economic development. And he was talking about that why should people need to travel 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers away from their villages and semi-urban areas to earn a livelihood for themselves and for their families. If we talk in terms of purchasing power parity expenditures, which they, by spending close to their villages and close to the places of their origin, can bring a livelihood to them and to their families, I think will be a better alternative. It is in this context that the self-reliance and the new model of the development has to be interpreted. And this is what I feel. Because when researchers, I know many agencies in India have gathered their statistics on the opinion of those who have reverse migrated to their villages. Would they be interested in days to come back to the metropolitan cities where they are earning their livelihoods before the pandemic? So their responses have been that at least 30 to 40%, they have said that they would explore other opportunities, in fact, close to their points of origin. So this is, I think, a fundamental thing, and that would need further researches in days to come. So migration, of course, was not the whole issue arising out of the economic compulsions. There were other compulsions also. And I believe that if people are confident that the economic development is reaching every nook and corner of the country and they have some opportunities close to their places of origin, I think in course of time, we may have lesser migration than we have witnessed in the past.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malhotra. Probably we could ask a comment on the migration thing from Dr. Portus, knowing that the Philippine Social Science Council houses also the Migration Center in the Philippines. Dr. Portus, would you like to give a comment on that, on the migrant workers? Are we attending to it and what is being done today? And the
Right.
challenges as well. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, but before that, I'd like to cover everything. I see some questions in the chat box addressed to our Filipino speakers. Now, the first one is to Dr. Del Pilar. Children of tender age are the worst sufferer. What is the effect of cognitive dissonance in children in the pandemic period with Philippine context? Well, I'm not a psychologist, but I am a communicator. And I think what I can share in this aspect is that, we had an advertisement before. I think most Filipinos will remember this. It's called Sa Mata ng Mga Bata, in the eyes of the child, no? And the message is that whatever you show to the children, no, that's what they think is right. No? So when they see people or their parents quarreling, or their parents cursing each other, or some attitudes of their parents that are not really to be seen, no, by these children, or they think that the children think that that's the right thing to do. So I think that's where cognitive dissonance is. And as a communicator, I think it will be good to really communicate not to the children, but to the parents, on how well we can really raise good children in this world. Okay? On the second question, the conduct of qualitative researchers have been negatively impacted by minimum health standards regulations like social distancing, etc., and a suggestion on how qualitative researchers can move forward within the context of these limitations. Well, that's a good question, because I think being a qualitative researcher, we have been experiencing this. No, as a qualitative researcher, we would normally like to go to where the action is, to see the natural setting, and to really feel what the informants feel, no, and to see their environment. But yes, that's right. Given the pandemic, we are not allowed to do that now. But I think it's not because no we are prevented from doing it, but it's because our risk should really not be exposed. No? So it's I think we abide by that. No, but one thing good with researchers and social scientists is that they adapt to the situation. So now we have really fully developed our systems and procedures in conducting online research. So I have several researches being conducted now, and they are all qualitative researchers, but we do online FGD. We do online key informant interviews. We do online surveys. And, well, I don't see there's much difference in the results. It's just that, there's this problem with us not seeing the actual setting. No? But the use of the cameras and the use of the internet has really narrowed down this gap. So yes, while there is pandemic, we still persist as researchers, and we do our interviews and FGDs online, and we are able to do it even in the remotest place. And in fact, Mayong is one of our research coordinators, and I was so amazed that he was able to go to the mountains, and we're amazed to find out that one of the indigenous, I think Mayong, this is an indigenous community, which is
Yes.
wired.
Yes.
So yeah, we are able to do this. So maybe Mayong, you can share something about that.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Odette. Well, very briefly, we create, I think it offers also opportunities for us to do qualitative research, because we can find ways to connect communities which we never thought before that could be done. So what we're trying to set up now is a conversation, an FGD with students, that we put them online, and the interviewer is coming from Manila. No? So and I think that creates a new way of doing this kind of research. As Dr. Tan have mentioned, they have to do on different narratives of people during this crisis. So yeah, to move forward our discussion, thank you very much, Dr. Portus, for sharing. We got a question from Dr. Hemant Kumar. What is it that we could learn from the Philippines in terms of fighting more effectively in fight of COVID and the jobless scenario? Well, in the Philippines now, that is still a very, very big debate, as we are still at the middle of the crisis. What is certain is, as far as surveys are concerned, hunger on people went up. There were so many uncertainties that people see in the future. And the government is trying to count on providing support to communities. But we all know that this is not also enough. Uh, there are initiatives here and there, but I think we would rather reserve a full discussion on this one on our second webinar, actually, because our second webinar for Dr. Kumar will focus basically on the issue of how do we attend to people directly during this crisis. No. So that would be the focus of our next webinar on the issue of social protection. And we will be inviting scholars from both countries to tackle on that issue. As we tackle also, I think later also on the next sessions we will have on the issue of economic stimulus package being prepared by these two countries. But thank you for raising that issue. For now, in the interest of time, how I wish I can continue this conversation with us. But just before we close our session, this will be a question for Dr. Sachin, Dr. Malhotra, and of course, Dr. Portus, that we would like to hear your final words and final thoughts on this. This is a question I would like to pose to everybody, and I think people don't want to be stuck so much with a crisis. They want to move. So the question I would like, and probably could be your wrapping up statement for our webinar, if the crisis is an opportunity to innovate or introduce new ways of seeing, acting, and working, what change would you like to see in our post-pandemic world? Probably may I invite Dr. Sachin, then before that, Dr. Portus, then Dr. Malhotra, in that order. Dr. Sachin, please. If there's an opportunity to innovate, what is it that you would like to see acting or working, that change that you would like to see in the post-pandemic world? Dr. Sachin?
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor Agua. It is extremely pleasant to be part of this initiative. And as I said in the beginning, whenever you were mentioning, Dr. Agua, about the internal debates in Philippines on traditional versus modern medicine, I would very much request you to begin contributing papers, as Professor Malhotra mentioned, that the idea is to engage in discussions. So I would very much like to invite you as a sociologist to contribute and reflect on the nuances of these debates in Philippines. How you see the challenges and what kind of possible traditional medicines are there. Let us focus on health to be very specific, but later on we can work out. So in my perspective, the way forward should be to understand we going forward in terms of leveraging science, technology, and innovation for our work as social scientists, and trying to see how that can really help. For instance, I also mentioned about fintech, and fintech contributing the technology in the finance sector is helping bringing in financial inclusion for everyone. So how Philippines and the society can achieve this in a major way. I also had an opportunity of seeing the communities that are there in Philippines, particularly the coastal areas, where much more sort of convergence India and Philippines may have, because we have recently introduced coast-led development program in India. So how coastal communities can contribute to that. These are some of the areas which fall very much into the overall strategies. And Philippines is also part of ASEAN. So with that, our bilateral and the regional cooperation comes in a major way for us to go forward. And we share a lot of commonalities, as Professor Bhushan Patwardhan mentioned. So I think it is important, and there are several synergies and commonalities, complementarities that we can bring together for collective benefit. So in my view, we can combine some of these areas for a greater analysis and greater understanding.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sachin. That is well said. May I go to Dr. Portus? Ma'am Odette?
Yeah. The question is what I want to see post-COVID, okay?
Yes.
I don't think we'll go back to our past, no? I don't think COVID will get away in the next 3 to 5 years, so we should embrace it. While we look at it as something that has devastated our economy, we should also look at the more positive sides. Like there are also positive sides. People began to, work on their hobbies. They become gardeners, cook, they embroider, they crochet. So all of these things that they were doing, they were not doing before, they are able to do now. And families now, I think, because they are all locked up inside the house, No, they have now the reason to bond, and they become closer and they converse a lot. No, in my family, this is the only time that we all really get to sit on the table and say anything, and get to know each other's day, and we're all working from home, so it's nice to know that you're surrounded by your children, where before they just they go anywhere. So when they come home, it's nighttime, and when they go, it's very early in the morning, so we don't have any conversation at all. But now that they're locked up, no, we have a lot of time to converse, and we have a lot of time to really get to know each other well, no? So I think we're seeing a world, that will embrace COVID. No, as Dr. Patwardan has mentioned, we don't even have evidence that remdesivir will be a good vaccine. No, so it's really difficult to say that it will end. So my outlook is that let's embrace it, no, and let's turn the negative aspect into something more positive. So we researchers, we social scientists are, in fact, enjoying it, because we are able to go to India virtually. We are able to invite you. Without this pandemic, maybe it will be difficult to conduct this or to mount this webinar, because you have to travel, or we have to travel there. We'll spend a lot. But now with the technology, we are really more connected. But of course, technologies have their pitfalls. Like Mayong, just went poof in the beginning, no? So I think that's also part of adjusting to this situation. Hopefully we'll get better connections, and hopefully there will be continuing adoption, no, to this technology. Our children are of course experiencing difficulty because of this, no, the digital and blended learning, and the parents get to get a lot of stress because they're the ones responsible in monitoring their children. But I think our government, our Department of Education, is trying to correct this, and hopefully there will be more measures or more policies, no, that will make the technology work not only in education but in all other aspects of our human life. So COVID will be here. Let us embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Portus. You are right. My wife is very happy actually during the pandemic. I have not traveled outside of our home for the last
That's right.
7 months. It's
Yes.
a blessing for all of us. Dr. Malhotra, please.
Uh, Thank you, Professor Guha. In fact, it has been a very nice session today, and we could listen to different viewpoints also, and different viewpoints at some stage do appear to be converging and diverging also. That's one thing. Secondly, I feel we are talking about normal, going back to the normal that existed, or will there be a new normal also? And new normal will become normal in a few days' time. That's another thing. And I do think that there is going to be a lot of change in our thinking, the thinking on health and hygiene. As Dr. Tan very rightly said, culture and governance, they are going to have a tremendous change. Thinking on education. There were times we were talking about online, quality of online teaching. There are times now we are talking about high standards of online teaching. And Dr. Porchus was making a mention about that. I do feel that international relations, international institutions, right, they are going to have tremendous changes in days to come. And maybe new collaborations and new partnerships will see many changes. Secondly, the data that appears before us today in the form of stories, I think stories need to be further supported by evidence. The data needs to be verified in days to come, and that would be happening. So I see lot many collaborations in the world, not only taking place in the area of research, but also in the area of health and hygiene. So they are going to be the points for tomorrow. As I said, under Atmanirbhar Bharat, the learning from India can be, or the Prime Minister of India is that in place of few towers of development, we'll have vast fields of development and opportunities for the greater number of masses. So There is a new understanding on environment also, I think, which has grown during this period of 6 months. Whether polluting the environment first and thinking of the remedies thereafter, and investing heavily or spending heavily on curing the environment, or what could be the possible solutions before us. Since Dr. Porchus was making a mention about family bonding getting more deep and intense, we have an evidence which contradicts that statement also. I know a number of papers have been published which talk about domestic violence during the pandemic
Really?
times. Right. So evidences are quite diverse in nature. And I think in days to come, there'll be further more researches. And maybe if there are stances of moving away from the journal statements or the journal findings, then the reasoning behind those findings would also need a little more underpinning and a little deeper evidence behind it. So with these words, I'll thank you all for being with us and making so nice and so touching presentations, in fact, not only erudite, but also, I mean, touching you everywhere, your mind and heart both. So I see, we had started our conversation with our Philippines partner by saying that you look too good while smiling. And I would like to repeat that sentence, that this word must be very healthy. It must have hygiene, and it should be smiling all the time, as you people are smiling right now before us. So all the very best. I'm looking forward to have 2 more sessions with you and number of wonderful presentations, projects, and I will emphasize joint publications. I said it in our conversation earlier also, that whatever is being presented is to be finally converted into a publication. And
Agree.
this is where a relationship must be taken.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malhotra. What a very interesting message you have given us, and the prospect of the cooperation between the two countries. The greatest challenge for a facilitator and a moderator on session like this is to provide a synthesis, and how would you synthesize such a wonderful presentation, so substantive presented by our speakers? I might not be able to do justice to all of that, but these are some of the quick points that came to mind when I was listening to all our speakers. As we battle with COVID, there is an important role on political leadership. I think both countries affirm that because they have different experiences. Then there should be a convergence of governance. In fact, Dr. Sachin have talked, it should be a seamless convergence in governance. Then the issue of cultural connect and disconnect of what we are doing. I think that has been shown by speakers from the two countries. Then also the issue and the question we raised, how do we propose policy? What do we mean by evidence-based? Because what is evident might be changing from one perspective and one experiences as well. And I think we have to interrogate the facts related to it. Then the next is in a question of where is people in all these questions that we would like to do. I think our colleagues have emphasized at the end of the day, this is all about our people. And they should benefit out of the debate, and they should benefit from the researches that we are doing. I think our colleague also in India and partly here in the Philippines have talked about the role of science and technology. The more we should use it in the service of humanity, especially in the height of this crisis. Then it has been said that while we have to do the localization of our strategies, because people at the end of the day are in our local communities, let us not also forget the need for global solidarity. And of course, an interesting perspective, I'm sure it will be taken up in future discussions, it's really the issue of dependence on medicines and the discourse on traditional health, and the modern technology and medicine. And how do you combine this for the benefit of the people? I think in both countries, there are really clear debates on all of this and how this is being deployed. And I think social scientists and both divide could really profit more on this issue. And I would like to pick up again that we should not allow the monocultural dominance, because I think at this time of the crisis, we have to encourage a perspective of diversity of people and of culture, because at the end of the day, this is about we in the social sciences would like to contribute in building a just and a humane society. The crisis is just a test of our solidarity. This has been a very interesting afternoon for both countries, for both organizations, the Philippine Social Science Council and the Indian Council of Social Science Research. This is our first. And we are coming up again future activities in the coming months. So please follow us in our website, and it will be announced in both organizations. The next that we have lined up actually as initiatives that we would like to undertake in the coming days, one would delve on the social protection issue during this time of pandemic. I think there are rich experiences that you could imagine both countries could share what worked well, what did not work well, and how the social scientists also contributed on this discourse. Then on the third that we would like to do is the issue of economic stimulus package. You know, everybody's talking about it, but if you ask people in the street, they actually don't understand about it. It seemed to be a discourse up there, left to people, economists like Dr. Sachin. But how do we filter it down, and what does it exactly mean for ordinary people that may uplift their problem on mental health? Because like, as I've said, in this part of the world, people are just so worried what is the prospect of the future for them. Of course, as mentioned also by Dr. Malhotra, there will be future initiatives that both collaboration likes to produce, from publication to joint researches and other more we could explore, because there's a lot for us to learn from each other. And this is where the vibrance of the social science is coming to the picture. Of course, I'd like to thank our resource persons who, despite their busy schedule, really tried to join us in these very important discussions we have. We would like to thank also those who followed us in this webinar on our page, especially those who asked questions, and for joining us for this timely and relevant discussion today. I hope you have profited much from our discussions. We are not here to provide answers to all questions. We are here, I think, as social scientists, as we always say, we are here. A good discussion is a discussion that generates great questions. And that's, I think, what we have achieved for today. For everybody that joined us in this webinar, we also request everyone to accomplish our brief evaluation form to help us improve in the way we are running this event, as we will be coming up with future activities still. The link to our evaluation is flashed on your screen, but it will also be flashed on the website that we are using for this conversation. Only those who are able to submit the evaluation form will be given certificate of attendance. The evaluation form will remain, well, they say 5 o'clock. We can extend a little of it because it's almost 5 o'clock here in the Philippines, for people to be able to fill up that one. Again, those who would like to follow this webinar, we will be posting on our web the recording of this seminar. We asked everybody that would like to review on this discourse and would like to share it also to their colleagues, that the video conversation during the seminar will be made available to all of us. I think I could only say at this point, thank you very much for everybody for joining us today, and for the two leaders of organizations, the Philippine Social Science Council headed by Dr. Portus and the Indian Council of Social Science Research, for bringing together this initiative. We are so excited to look forward at the prospect of this cooperation. Again, as they said, in crisis, it will bring us opportunities. And for us, in the Philippine Social Science Council, this is the opportunity that we're able to stumble in the midst of the COVID crisis. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, Thank you very much. I think it's now a good afternoon in both countries.
Thank
We
you.
have finally come and concluded in here. And this is Mario Aguja from the Philippines saying thank you very much for sharing with us, to all our resource persons, to those who followed us in the conversation. I hope that you find this activity of ours this afternoon a productive one. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Thank
Thank
you very much.
Thank you very much. May I take this opportunity to also thank Dr. Madukar. No, he's been very supportive in coordinating this seminar. Dr. Madukar, how are you? Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.